Zuffa Boxing had its third show, its first one headlined by heavyweights, and that was Efe Ajagba and Charles Martin. Former IBF heavyweight champion Charles Martin, contender Efe Ajagba. Let's start. I'll start a little bit with the fights. I want to give credit to Umar Dzambekov, undefeated light heavyweight out of Russia now, 14-0, 10 knockouts, I believe. And to cut Max Kellerman some slack, who people have been riding on him for the Callum Walsh Roy Jones comparison. He called a fighter on the undercard having a Larry Holmes like jab early in the night. But I'll tell you what, Dzambekov, he had a little bit of those Alexander Usyk feints, okay? And I understand that's what Max is trying to do. He's not literally saying Callum Walsh is Roy Jones and that the kid on the undercard was Larry Holmes. He's trying to, make a comparison to a look, a tool that has been made proliferated as famous from the past from a great fighter. So Dzambekov knocking out Ahmed Abalabi, who I've known very well out here in the Vegas gyms. He was 24-1 heading into this, and Dzambekov looks like a legit guy at light heavyweight. So I needed to give credit. That was a beautiful right uppercut knockout in round one. And then in the main event, kind of went to script. Charles Martin, again, like Max noted, is the craftier between him and Efe Ajagba. So he got off first. He popped his head around with some straight left hands, arguably won the first two rounds. But it became a case of, I can take your left hand a lot better than you're going to take this right hand. And Ajagba disguised it with a little short, I think it was left uppercut, put something in front of the right hand, and then dropped him in the third round, finished him in the fourth round. Ajagba, he came to the United States as a busy volume guy. Since then, he's been a lot more economical with his shots. He plods forward a bit, but he continues to get a little more sophisticated in his approach, and he had a good performance. And it was an entertaining 4-round heavyweight scrap. We'll get to Dana White's post-fight and everything as we continue on. What were your thoughts? What do you want to open with on that first or the third Zuffa Boxing card?
What struck me this time was production-wise. Let me touch on the presentation of the product. Of course, Max is still getting incoming because he can't help himself. He's just a used car salesman now. And we all know what the car is that you're selling, bro. It's not a Rolls. It's not a Ferrari. It's not even a Benz or a Mercedes. You have a economy car. This is a very attainable vehicle by just about anybody who would be entering the sport of boxing. Stop trying to sell us on a Rolls Royce. It's okay if you're putting this car together and you're building something for the future. When we get to the Dana White post-fight press conference, I think that's part and parcel of it. They just keep selling us for the future. And what I said before is what I will say again. Just be proud of the product as it is presented. No, I don't see a Larry Holmes jab. Like, why? You're trying to remind us of what we most want to see from traditional boxing, that one day this will be here. Okay, but not today. All right? And the jab that we're looking at, just assess it for what it is and the fighter for who he is, and let us appreciate what we've got. And I'll tell you something, I didn't watch it live. That was no decision I made based on the value of the show. It was simply, I'm at the moment in the UK. It comes on at like 4 or 5 in the morning on a Monday morning because it's a Sunday night show, and I was asleep. So I watch it in the afternoon the next day or so, and I'll give you this. I actually enjoy the way they construct the replay because it isn't the live show that people watch in real time. What they've done is cut down all the fat. They took the in-between rounds away. It's pretty much just the action. On the third show, being this show, there was knockouts. So the fights were short. I was surprised how quickly I got through it. In fact, I really only watched the main and co-main event. It was a delicious snack of a show. I got to it, got through it, knockouts. It's all you want, and I'm fine with that. The part that is interesting to me also is the little bits that are different in the sense that there's no real crowd presence. Obviously, there are people in the building, but it's deadly silent in there. So you can hear the breath, you can hear the gloves hitting the opponent. You can hear the every bit of sound coming from the ring, which, believe it or not, I like. There needs to be some kind of other audio. I'm not asking for the stadium crowd bit. I like being able to hear all of those things from the fight. However, there needs to be some other bit of energy because, as interesting as that is to me, there is some lack of excitement in exciting moments because there's no counter noise to what's happening. And the broadcasters are simply, and this is no criticism of them, they're just not like the Larry, or I should say, Jim Lampley style. They're not hype type of broadcasters. So between the
Testator was.
conversation, huh?
Testator almost lost his voice on some of those knockout calls.
Well, I don't know. Maybe I'm not affected. Let me put it that way. I'm not affected by anything else. So when those knockouts came, I was like, all right, that's cool. Moving on. You know, I hope I don't sound like I'm being nitpicky because I rather enjoyed, at least in the replay, how quick it was, how we got to the point. I say what I say about the commentary, but this model, as they shape it, I do believe they will work out the bugs, add in some things that are missing right now, and probably will be an effective presentation of boxing that is an alternative kind of to what we're accustomed to getting. I don't mind it. It's still just, they just are still jiggering with it. They don't quite got it yet.
Well, as part of that is because again, they're holding everything at the Apex Center. And to borrow a United Nations New World Order Agenda 2030 term, they're doing what's called sustainable development. They're they're right. No, but seriously, I mean, they're not coming out spending a whole bunch of money and overpricing fighters like Hearn did and Heyman did. They're starting small and looking to grow big, long term, sustainable development. Um, and what was interesting in the post fight about Dana White was he said that it feels like I'm beating up babies, which isn't really in vogue right now with all the Epstein stuff going on and all this stuff about and Michael Jordan was touching touching the kid over. So it's not really the thing to the analogy you want to use right now. But I'm just whatever
Well,
being
you know what? To
yeah
be fair, because when we get into this press conference bit, that's like its whole segment. You know what I'm
yeah
saying?
yeah
The what you're saying about developing something slow is true. I feel as if we're watching auditions. You know how you're watching like American Idol back in the day, and sometimes the best bits was the auditions and the people who didn't make it. I feel like we're just watching them go through the weed out process and start to build narratives because what they're going to need to do, and I don't think that this is lost on them for a second, especially since we're dealing with WWE executives, is they're going to have to make this matter. I guess what's missing is the stakes. I don't care if Efe Ajagba wins or Charles Martin wins. I don't really have any investment in these fights, or I don't see what their path forward is, or what it means to win or lose, or even to their personal lives. Their own narratives and journeys really haven't been presented. And I understand why they're not yet investing in that. But what I expect is when the people get through the strainer, when they get through this kind of audition phase and they decide who their core fighters are going to be and who people are interested in, who's getting these knockouts as opposed to who's getting knocked out, then maybe you start to build these narratives, build these storylines, and create its own universe where something matters. To maybe Eddie Hearn's point, it's true. Nobody gives a shit about a Zuffa belt right now. Now, maybe that changes March 8th when you bring in Opataya, but right now, none of this means anything. And that's part of what's missing from the experience. However, the boxing itself, if you just bill it as a club show with good matchups, now this time it was knockouts almost exclusively, kind of one-sided fights, really weren't 50-50 fights, but I'm satisfied with that too. They weren't slow. It wasn't, a 12-round one-sided snooze fest. At least get this knockout and get it early. Okay, fine. But it also has to mean something, has to matter. And that's where, when you have this four belt era and all of these sanctioning bodies and the whole world of traditional boxing, you weave those fights into a narrative. You know where these fighters are going, what they're trying to accomplish. So it gives the stakes to the fight. Right now, these fights have no stakes, but I see them building a cast, right? That's what I'm seeing. And so once they have their cast together, they'll switch into the next mode where you get the narrative, the storytelling, and the stakes of these fights.
Well, I think the best job they've done so far was with Robert Merriweather. But that, I might be thinking that because I go back covering Robert as a teenager at Floyd's gym, and but I mean they had him on the Inside the Ring show shortly after his win. He's their first, not well, first of a few others as well. Emiliano Cardenas is another one, and maybe a few others. Not quite. Umar Dzambekov is the first I'm really watching this guy, and I was impressed with him. But Robert was the first guy, one of the first guys. They had a nice little package before he fought. He came on Inside the Ring thereafter. He's one of the first Zufa branded, built from scratch, so to speak, kind of guys they're getting from the pros. So, and then I think the one reason they made people will care about the Zuffa belt when Opataya fights is because it's co-opting what they hope to make the old order of boxing because he's the lineal champion. So, but it was interesting that Max was asking for a BMF belt, and he's always Mister. There's too many belts in boxing, and part of this Ali Act change they're trying to make, and will make inevitably, is saying, well, you can't have more than one belt in a sanctioning body, and already they can't even get through show number 3, and they're asking for 2 in each. But yeah, so and I think the stakes you're talking about is playing the long game. They don't want to necessarily pay a Ryan Garcia and a Mario Barrios millions of dollars. They want to wait until maybe this crop of stars has already been paid and overpaid by Turkey, and once that era runs its course, they can start to do their model, and that's when you'll see bigger names and fights and title fights move into actual crowds and not just at their Apex Center.
Yeah, they believe in what they're saying. And I think that what they see in the future, they just can't wait to materialize. So they talk
Right,
about it like it's right now.
right.
Max Kellerman would be better servicing the product to be honest about what they're looking at and also be critical when there's criticism to be had. If you're watching Zufa, if you're already turned on to Paramount Plus, you're not turning it off or on because of anything Max necessarily says. However, you might retain me. You might also retain some of your credibility and my investment in what you say if I can rely on what you say as being genuine. I'd rather hear a little criticism that's honest and let me know where you think these things can be fixed or where you think this stuff should go rather than make me listen to you tell me everything's perfect and how much greater it is than anything I can get anywhere else when I know that not to be true at the moment. So later on, when the product is where you want it to be, when it does develop to where it wants to go, then I can still trust your voice. And if there's cracks or flaws in the system, I think you might be there to fix them as opposed to just paint over them and tell me that shit is shinola. That's also, I think, a fundamental mistake. And they're accustomed, I think, with the WWE, with the UFC, and the way that that was built to having a monopoly out of the gate, to having an audience that just has to buy what they're selling and being given a product that there really isn't any alternative to. There is an alternative to Zuffa Boxing. You know what I mean? This isn't perfect yet, and the vision that you have has yet to be materialized. However, I believe it will be materialized. I do have confidence that these guys are going to make their vision reality, and then we'll, like I said much earlier in shows, see what it's like when you have one apple to apples comparison. Just give us what it is right now, and I would like for there to be, if it's not going to be Max, then maybe it's Andre Ward, somebody on that panel, somebody on these microphones need to just talk to us like they respect our intelligence, and we're not just, you know what I mean, customers being sold a bill of goods in a candy shop.
Well, while I'm on the subject of critiquing broadcasters, much more accomplished and maybe even talented than I am, I'll continue. I'll add to your point. Maybe part of why you're not one point you're getting at is if you're already starting at a 10, then there's nowhere to go up. There's like, how are you going to increase your praise and excitement of the product when it's at like a 5 or a 6 right now, but you're at 10 already? kind of like Joe Tessitore's knockout calls on undercards. It's like, wow! And it's like, there's well, where do you go for the main event now? You've already,
Right.
you're literally running
Right.
out of your voice a little bit by main event time, and they're joking about it. There's an art to the super hype undercard knockout, like Jim Lampley when he did De La Hoya Vargas, and this would be the most emotional win of Oscar's career if he could make Fernando Vargas eat his words, and he has. Oscar De La Hoya has the most satisfying, the greatest knockout. If he was doing that in fight number 2 of the night, I don't know if it hit the same by the time he got to main event. I'm sure Calvin Brock, Zuri Lawrence was on a Vargas Mosley undercard. I'm sure if I went back, Jim was on some hype shit, but not like he was for De La Hoya Vargas. He was, there's levels to the hype. While I'm critiquing once again broadcasters much more accomplished.
I think we're not critiquing the broadcasters so much as the strategy, which I think the broadcasters have employed.
Fair
If
enough.
you if God smiles upon you and your scouts are sharp shooting eyed enough to find the next Larry Holmes jab, if you are blessed
By the way, Larry
with
Holmes'
that
jab
kind of
came from here.
gift,
It came from
you're
here,
blessed
Ryan.
with that kind
It
of
wasn't
gift
here. It was
as
here.
a promoter, you'd sure like to be able to call it when you actually see it. Now, if that guy happens to come along, and I hear again from this panel that from Max that he's seeing a Larry Holmes jab, I really won't believe him. I really won't believe him. I want that to be something that you hold dear. That that kind of fawning, that kind of uh, attribution of such an incredible compliment to be worthy. So when it actually happens, we can all celebrate that moment together, and I don't have to text Sean and be like, "Man, did you hear this shit again?" Sorry, man.
It's cool. Yeah. Okay, but I did think, okay, like when Devin Haney did the Larry Holmes jab against Brian Norman, that was more appropriate, right? It was coming from the hip. He feinted it. Bang! It was in a title fight. It was against the number one. What was that fair? What about that? Was that more appropriate?
I mean, it was more appropriate. The
More,
Larry Holmes jab, I don't know if you can
yeah.
even I don't even think you can get that in one fight. That's like saying, "Oh, this guy's got like Ali footwork." I don't even know if you can establish that in one fight. We need to see an arc of a body of work to suggest that this is a talent you're blessed with, a skill that you have to be spoken of in that same lofty company.
What about the Umar Dzambekov Usyk fights? Am I going too far there? They were Usykian.
Well, to be fair, Usyk is still active.
Right.
In one day, there will be a generation of fight fans who will revere him, and probably amongst the gods, especially if they're Eastern European. But right now, yeah, that's a lot more fair. He's a lot more an attainable type of fighter right now. You know what I mean? Like I can see you drawing correlations, but you're talking about hallowed names and Larry Holmes and Ali and Sugar Ray Leonard, and these are not fighters you can just throw their names out on up and comers.
Got you. Okay. Now we go to the press conference, right? So I think well, a few things I gotta push back on Dana White. Shocker, right? From me. But I think is so he mentions how Eddie Hearn got it from his daddy, right? Which is a beautiful thing. I hope to give my kids something that they get from their daddy one day. But me and Dana White didn't have rich daddies. So so God bless Eddie Hearn. He got a rich dad. But his point being, he didn't get it from the mud like someone who he did. And to Dana's credit, he built up UFC into what it was alongside the Fertitas. Yeah, they own the company. Yeah, they invested the initial capital. Yeah, I believe he didn't get there till 2001. But UFC is synonymous with Dana White because Dana White is what changed the entire trajectory of UFC. Credit to him for that, right? But you've had some daddies too. They just don't share your last name like Eddie's dad. All right, you got a sugar daddy now called Turkey Al Sheikh. You got a dad named Ari Emanuel and Lorenzo Fertitta and his brother. They were your partners, but they were the guys who invested the capital, who you got the money from to do what you did best, and that was grow UFC. To your credit, so I would you're puffing your chest out. Isn't 60% of this whole thing owned by Salah, owned by Turkey's crew. It's not on, not 50, 60. And is it your boss, Ari Emanuel? You got a boss. Eddie's his own boss. His dad let him become his own boss. I mean, hey, wait, no, excuse me. You share a sugar daddy called Turkey Al Sheikh. So you both got a daddy right now. And no, go
Let
ahead.
me
Go
let
ahead.
me say this in defense of Eddie Hearn. In this, he works for his daddy. He was born with a silver spoon. He's
Beautiful
a
thing.
trust fund baby. I've been hearing that the whole of the time I've been covering British boxing. And the truth of it is that yes, he inherited a business. Surely he has never touched mud as a part of his building of himself or the empire that he reigns over currently. But it cannot be denied that, and I'll use his own quip, he was born with a silver spoon, but he turned to gold,
Excuse me.
right? This is the truth. You cannot deny that even with what he was provided, he has elevated that property to an extraordinary height beyond what it was when he received it. And I don't know what the structure of his company is. I don't know if the Netflix kind of series is to be trusted, but I don't think he works for daddy. I don't think he has to run back to Papa for decision making authority or even vision as to what he wants to do or where he wants to go with Matchroom. Eddie Hearn is very much an operator at the top level. He is shrewd and incredibly successful. I believe what we see before us is his vision playing out. And if you look back to when he took the reins, this place in Matchroom is well levels above what he inherited. Now, in the same way that Eddie will needle people and wind people up, he wouldn't be above probably criticizing an opponent or a competitor in the same kind of cheeky way that Dana White is doing to him. They all throw these bars back and forth, but we can't pretend like Eddie is not successful in his own right or hasn't done anything extraordinary with what he's inherited. But guys who did get it from the mud, who have built themselves out of nothing or with no real parental assistance, like yourself, like myself, like I assume Dana feels, we do feel a certain level of pride about that in particular. There is a certain level of, you could never be this, you could never do this. And we'll never know if Eddie could have built anything from zero. But at the same stretch, the pressures of being somebody's son or inheriting something that you didn't build, having to hear that kind of shit all the time while you're putting your own vision together on top of something is its own level of adversity, pressure, difficulty, and it requires so much more is expected that you have to kind of deliver so much more to get credit for anything. So I just feel like that must be said because I have worked with this guy Eddie Hearn over the many years, and I can't deny that to be the truth. That is the truth of the dynamic. I respect both sides of it, though. It's that criticism I hear about him all the time, and you gotta put some respect on his name.
Yeah, I mean, hey, like what father wouldn't want to leave their son behind something to inherit and grow and be prosperous with? So God bless them. The point I was making and being kind of funny with, but serious at the same time, is you both share a sugar daddy right now. His name is Turkey Alashi. And you got a boss, all right? You got a couple bosses at TKO, all right? You had a boss before TKO bought the company, all right? So slow down a little bit there. But I get his point and everything. I know you sometimes you're like, we don't got to go take it to the inside baseball. I can't help myself, right? So I seen in the midst of all this Floyd Mayweather suing Espinoza and naming Al Heyman in the lawsuit, which is fair game to get at. We went at it a week or so ago. But Vince Cummins, right? He has a podcast with his partner too. They do what we do. Respect to those guys, and they got a crew on social media, and they're saying, well, surely the Almighty Ali Act could have protected Floyd Mayweather, making a joke about how inconsequential the Ali Act is. And certainly it's been circumvented in ways and isn't foolproof, that's for sure. But under Dana's new contracts leaked by Thomas Hauser, you wouldn't have the right to sue anybody. You would literally partly in your contract have a clause that says you can't sue us. So it's not quite the dunk you think it is. I understand their perspective, but it's at least Floyd can try to sue them. He's literally if he was under a Dana White, TKO, Ari Emanuel contract, Nick Khan, he wouldn't even have that as an option to pursue that legally. So just
That's a
something
great
I had to
point.
mention there. Yeah, there's something I had to
People
mention there.
talk
And
about the
also, if it wasn't so important, they wouldn't be going through all these measures to enact amendments to it. Clearly,
yeah.
there's something about it that, yeah,
When you talk about, people talk about the failures of the Ali Act. They point this out and point out who skirted the legislation and such. But you're right.
yeah,
Without that, then you have no recourse. Law, in any regard, doesn't stop crime. It gives you recourse for when a crime is committed, and you hope it deters those from committing crimes because of the punishment that can be levied after the recourse. That's what law is. Law isn't policing. It's not the same thing. There's no, Ali Act police. You got to break the law, and then somebody has to redress those grievances. So, fair point. However, I must say, and I don't know anything more than anybody else, but I'm not hearing a lot of talk about the Ali Act from these guys much anymore. I'm not hearing a lot about what the new structure is going to be implemented or when that's going to take hold or if they're even still pursuing that. I wonder if they're even still really pursuing that with with the intention that they originally stated. Maybe, but it's just interesting that it's gotten kind of quiet on that front.
well, it's because it's maybe close to being in the bag. I think a majority of Congress that had to vote on it last month in January, they voted for it to go ahead, Democrats and Republicans included. Now it's just a matter of finalizing it all. And again, I mentioned again, I got to mention again, it's like, what was Al Heyman ultimately in court for multiple times with Bob Arum and had to settle for millions of dollars out of, in a lawsuit? The Ali Act was Bob Arum. So it had the man in court multiple times. Sometimes he won, sometimes he had to settle, which is a soft loss, I think is fair to say, right? And so, anyways, that aside, when Dana says he's it's like beating up babies, right? It's like, well, he's not beating up anybody yet, all right? Efe Ajagba and Charles Martin is not beating up babies. Now, your fellow sugar daddy, who's the sugar daddy of all of boxing. I'm not picking on you, Dana. I mean, separate aside, this would have been a chance this weekend with Garcia and Barrios. It's a hell of a card. Hitchens and Duarte, Andy Hiroka against Gary Antoine, and then the main event, Garcia. It's a hell of a card. This would have been a chance for two American promoters in TGB, aka PBC, and Oscar with Golden Boy to stand firm and go, look at us, sans Zufa, sans Turkey Al Sheikh, putting on a card that reminds you how good boxing can be without these forces. And instead, they folded and let Turkey come in and take over the card. Hey, that's their prerogative. They're going to do what they're going to do. But when Dana talks about, it's like beating up babies. It's like we haven't beat shit up yet. This isn't. You haven't even had a show outside of this facility yet. Well, you haven't. You're probably the forecast reads. You're probably gonna be beating shit up. But to Raheem's point about earlier, selling it like it's a 10 when it's not there yet, you haven't beat shit up yet. You probably will, but not yet. What babies? And what are you talking about? Like when you expected more resistance? Do you mean to the Ali Act stuff and government? Well, I'm sorry. Not everybody has a boss whose brother worked for the Obama camp, and not everybody has a boss who was the agent of the current president. And all, you got some connections, my man. They can't do shit about it any ways. Nobody can. Salute to you, I suppose. Kinda. Not
Yeah,
really.
I thought that was a curious comment because beating up babies, to your point, Sean, we're there's kind of you guys are all sharing a playpen. Like one of those babies is your partner. Because what I just came from yesterday was a Ring Magazine Netflix press conference for Fury and Magdramov,
Makhmudov.
uh, Magmadov.
Makhmudov.
We'll,
Arslanbek. Just call him Arslanbek.
we'll take that again.
Yeah.
What I just came from was a Ring Magazine, Netflix, Fury Magmadov press conference. So that would have to be one of the babies that you're beating up. That's a massive show. That is real boxing, no sensationalism element to it. on Netflix now for the first time. Because don't be fooled, like every other show of boxing that Netflix has carried so far has certainly had some crossover sensational element to it that really wasn't traditional boxing. This is this is a show you would put on any boxing network, the Zone, ESPN, whatever, HBO in the old days. It's not even a title fight. Um, uh, Makhmudov is not going to bring a single audience. I mean, of course, he'll have some fans, but you understand what I'm saying. He ain't going to move the needle. So this is all in the back of Tyson Fury, all in the back of traditional boxing. And it's a much bigger show than anything that's happening in Zuffa. We're probably on the cusp of a Dubois Wardley press conference, which is an all British title fight that I think people are going to be super excited for, super hyped for. Even the show that's coming this Saturday dwarfs anything that's happened at the Meta Arena. Garcia Barrios for one of those, titles that aren't supposed to matter. A massive show. So traditional boxing, those other so-called babies in the playpen, are walking and talking and holding their own right now. I'm not sure that you're beating them up. Now, whatever it is that, again, this vision that you see that we don't see yet, or maybe some maneuvering behind the scenes that we're not aware of yet, maybe in business, you're beating them and we just haven't seen the bruising yet. It's got to be the only thing you could be referencing because the babies are winning. If boxing, traditional boxing shows are the babies, they're beating the shit out of Zufa right now. So I'm not sure where that comment comes from unless you're just forecasting something like the punch we don't see coming yet.
And we do see it coming. Like I'm saying, in all likelihood, this right hand will land. But to your point about, getting upended by Netflix and Fury, say, oh, isn't Jake Paul doing Ronda Rousey on Netflix too? What's going on there? You got some competition in the summer for your White House card you've been pumping up a little bit there too. So, yeah, she's fighting the Gina Carano broad, right? Yeah, hey, I'm so sorry. Now. Yeah, she's Italian, all right? I can, have a little creative license there. She's fighting Gina Carano, though, right, on Netflix. So, Jake Paul, look at this, Raheem. He's reduced me to gassing up a Jake Paul Ronda Rousey card. This man, he is winning. He's left me in shambles. That's how you know he is winning.
I mean, listen, to be fair, we don't really do MMA at all, but I wouldn't mind that being its own episode maybe in the very near future. Just because just landscape wise, I didn't see that coming across my wire until I saw it. That's interesting. Like to me, that's yet another. While it isn't, traditional, I guess, MMA. Only in the sense that these are not active fighters who are contending in the sport currently. So there is some sensationalism to it that you're bringing Ronda Rousey back, who we all, I think, thought was retired for good. So yeah, there's something there in that makes it different than a normal MMA card or something you might see on a UFC promotion. But save that, it's yet another real road into combat sports in a more traditional sense. And what Netflix is becoming is a real combat network for big shows. And again, though, yeah, all right, we can look at that as competition for Dana White's Paramount Plus deal with the UFC. But at the same time, they're all kind of in this playpen together if we're going to continue the baby analogy.
No, they are, yeah.
And I get confused as to who's really competing with who and kind of like in WWE style, like who's really playing off of what? Like, is this all kind of cosplay corporate competition when the reality is everybody's winning?
Remember my original conspiracy theory. Jake Paul has just amassed a female stable that he will eventually merge with Dana and TKO with. It's like, oh, well, eventually we need women's boxing. It's like, I have all of them. So,
these co-promotions happen where if you want to put a big women's show on, you got to come to the Pauls.
Yeah, because remember, Jake has said one thing about the Ali Act, and him and Dana They have their kayfabe beef, although they've sat in many a VIP box together. They were together on inauguration night in 24. So they got their, I call it kayfabe beef. And kayfabe, hey, those are shoot works. Some of it's real, some of it's work. And then, but Nikisa, the guy putting the business together for Jake, he's always been, even though he has a beef with Dana White too, but he's always agreed with him on the UBO stuff and the Aliak stuff. So we'll see. That's an old school. That's like a early 2025 Big SZ conspiracy theory. One of them that might actually come true.
Could we see MVP becoming a UBO?
I mean, they have all the makings of one if they want to be one.
And I would say more so than Zufa, actually. They kind of do have a uniqueness to what they're doing that isn't really rivaled anywhere else. There is no other promotion company that is, narrowly focused on women's boxing.
Yeah.
Zufa's just doing boxing, and however they want to present it, it's still just boxing. And I know that there's women's boxing, in different promotions, but a promotion that is narrowly focused on that. Do they even have, any other fighters on MVP that are not females?
I'd have to check. I mean, they got Jamal Harvey, who to me is a blue chip type prospect, if not blue chip, a future world champion. Jamal Harvey, who fought on that Jake Paul Joshua card, he's nice. They let Ashton Sylvie go after he got upset by Lucas Body, but I think Jamal Harvey is the best talent on the men's side that MVP has ever signed. I really like him. He was an Olympian.
So I wonder what they're doing with the men's side, because right now their brand is 100% Jake Paul, obviously.
Right.
Carries his own brand. He's the guy. But then everything underneath that is all this women's roster, which just keeps getting bigger, more impressive. They keep putting on massive shows. They keep slotting these women in for huge, huge platforms, huge visibility. I don't know any other promotion company now or ever in history that has had that focus or even near that amount of success with women's boxing, to be fair. I mean, that, I would say, if anything, warrants some kind of UBO or some kind of new model that you could justify as, oh, we're doing a different thing.